Right, so where we are now is just at the edge of Baggeridge Country Park, which is belongs to South Staffordshire Council. It was originally Baggeridge Colliery, which closed in March 1968. It was operational from about 1910, fully operational. And where we're standing now, this is First Street here, which is the only way in and out for clay for the brickyard over there, bricks, finished product. Coal come out of this way, and the only other coal that went out of here went out on the railway, which is down there. So it was a very busy little bit of road. Down there is where the wharf was. There were two weighbridges down there. You've got private coal merchants, you've got the coal board's own drivers and lorries down there. The bag drivers used to do 2 loads a day, and that was, sorry, 1 load a day, 9 tonnes, and they used to have to bag that up, stack it 3 high on the lorry and deliver it into people's coal cellars and what have you. The tankers, or charrels as they called them, they didn't have to load those up because it was done from a hopper, and they just had to carry it off. So they used to do 2 loads a day, 7 tonne a time, 14 tonnes a day. And they got access to the baths which were behind me. The private coal blokes, they had to go home dirty. So that was down there. Also the maintenance facilities for the lorries were down there. Behind me here is the pit yard, and where these trees are here was the stores, and that was the stores where all sorts of things were kept in there. Usually the things that were worth stealing, they were kept in there. Spare parts for the trucks, things for the pit, even bags for the where they bagged up the smoke as fuel. That was there. Right along here on the right hand side, just here, was the office, where there was the pay office. This is where you went and got your money. Also behind that was the comptometer operators. Remember those? This is where they did all the paperwork and stuff for the people, you know, buying the coal from the land sale. It was known as. On this side here, this is the wages office. The surveyor's office, which was a bigger building higher up, was in there, and beyond that you got the manager's office, and also the chap who was in charge of the ventilation. His office was down there. This was the pit yard, and this is where the coaches came at the start and end of each shift. The baths just over there. This is the clean side and the dirty side. So the coaches used to drop the miners off here. They were Kendrick's coaches from Tipton, and on this end here there were 2 flights coaches, and they were a lot posher than the Kendrick's ones, and they came with the chaps who'd been moved here in 1965 from Hampstead Pit when that was closed. In fact, a lot of those are Geordies because they've been relocated from Durham to come and work at Hampstead, which was short-lived, and so they ended up here. So over here is the pithead baths, the canteen and the first aid room. You went in there at the start of the shift. On the right hand side was the canteen, and in there is where you could get your chewing tobacco, your twist, and snuff, various types of snuff, usually Menex, which was made locally. And that was currency down the pit, you see, because you got no smoking equipment allowed. You couldn't smoke, so chewing tobacco and snuff were, if somebody did you a favour, offer them a pinch of snuff, that sort of thing. So the way it worked was you go in there, get your clean clothes off, take your bag or your soap and towel. This is where you could clean your boots or you could dub in them. Behind there is the lamp room, which I'll mention now. Now just here would have been the lamp room, which is where you went in there to pick up your lamp. If you're somebody with an oil lamp, you'd pick that up as well. And you get your brass checks, which you had to take with you to the pit top. Then you proceeded from there. Oh, incidentally, just inside there was the barometer. The officials always check the barometer, because if the air pressure was low, you couldn't go down the mine. Didn't happen in my time, but if you do that, if the air pressure is low, it gets old gases coming out of old districts. So they had to be careful with that, and it was a very expensive posh barometer. So that was just there as well. So you went from there and you got your lamp checks, and then there was a bridge just across there, roughly where that stone is, and that took you to the pit top, to the top of number 2 shaft, which is the one that you went down at the start and the end of your shift. Just here, on this side here, there was a bridge which you could walk over, and that dropped you down into the stockyard as well. Also, lorries could get down there if they'd made a delivery. If they were bringing stuff for the stockyard, they could get down there over that bridge. To the right of the bridge, just here, again it's lower than where we are now, was the powder magazine, and that was where the explosives were dished out to the people who knew they got to get them, and also the detonators, which were kept by officials and shot firers. The actual main powder magazine, where most of the stuff was up on the hill over there. That's gone now completely, but this was the one where the stuff was decanted to and then dished out at the beginning of the shift, and then the empty cans were brought back in. This is another stockyard here, again bigger pieces of kit. Also our cable, we stored our cable down here. Again, you can see it's on a lower level, things came down lower. Just there is where this covered walkway came from the baths, so you could keep dry, to number 2 shaft, which is just over there where that clump of trees now is. Number 2 shaft is where the coal came up during the day and afternoon shift. At night is where bigger pieces of machinery, steel work and stuff went down that shaft. That shaft is open to the air, and it's in round figures 2,000 feet deep and 17-foot diameter, brick lined. That's the one that you travelled at the beginning and the end of the shift. The other one, which is just over there, number 1 shaft, which we'll walk over to shortly, was a narrower one, and I'll explain what that shaft did. Now just to the right here is where the winding engine house would have been. Now when I was here, this was electric, ran on DC. They got mercury arc rectifier in there, which converted AC into DC because it's more controllable for the winding engine. So that was there. This is the pit top, and just here where I am now, this was a hive of activity just here, and this is where the coal came up the shaft, double deck mine cars, got rammed off with compressed air. It was Westinghouse equipment, ran round a switchback system into a tippler which tipped the coal upside down and went down that way on what they call the run of the mine belt, down to the washery and the screening to get it sized up accordingly. Behind me here, this area here, would have been the boiler house. A big chimney, over 200 feet high, about 240 foot high chimney was there. Originally there were 11 boilers. In my day there were 2, because the steam winder was changed in the late 50s to electricity, so they didn't need that much steam, and so these boilers here, all they were used for was the hot water for the heating systems around the pit and the hot water for the baths. That's what it was used for. So it was one running and the other one as a spare. I did go inside them actually when I was working with the fitters. And that was just there. Right, we need to walk now round to number 1 pit, which is the upcast shaft, which is where the air came up after it had circulated round the pit. The reason Baggeridge pit actually is here, why it exists, is because all of the coal in the Black Country is very shallow. 100 feet was a deep mine, you know, a lot of them were less than that, hence all the subsidence they used to get. But of course over the years the coal became exhausted, so engineers suggested that if you went east to where Hampstead pit was in Sandwell Park, there was what they call a down throw fault where the coal was a lot deeper, and so it was proved over there it was about 600 yards down. So that's when those pits opened up. They opened before Baggeridge. So the same engineers suggested that there was a western boundary fault where a similar thing had occurred, and that was here. And so the Earl of Dudley with his friend the Duke of Sutherland, or relation, I think there was marriage relationship, did some drilling here. They lost a drill bit worth 200 quid, but they did eventually prove that there was coal here, and so that's when the sinking of the shaft started, which I think was number 1 pit. But about halfway down they found what they called a perfect sea of water, and it set them back a couple of years until they eventually, some people say they put cast iron plates in, but they didn't. It was done by coffering, which is 2 layers of brick, and they eventually did it and got down beyond the water to 696 yards. That shaft over there, number 1, is 14-foot diameter, and that's the upcast shaft, and I'll tell you about that when we get to it. This shaft here, this is number 2 pit, which is the one that's open to the air and the one that the coal comes up. Because remember, they're winding coal all day with this, and then you're the one that's travelling it at the end of your shift. And this thing was doing 44 feet a second with men on. So you got one going down, one coming up, and they're guided by guide ropes so they don't hit each other. So one's going down, one's coming up, and so they're getting a move on. But the old steam winders apparently were even faster. So, you know, it could be quite a hairy ride. And the headgear was 110 feet high on that one. Not quite as high on the other one. Also, incidentally, you know, to stop the air short circuiting between that shaft and that shaft underground, you've got 3 air control doors. So you have to get a big lever to break the seal to get into the one chamber, shut the door behind you, same again, move into the next chamber, same again, outside. And that stops the air short circuiting, because the air has to go down that shaft all the way around the workings under Womban, Wolverhampton, Penn, Lower Penn, and come back up that one over there. And when we get to that one, I'll tell you a little bit more about what went on over there. It took about 10 or 12 years to get this. It actually went into full production by 1912. There were 3,000 men here then, and there were, I think it was over 500,000 tonnes of coal it could produce. But of course that was mostly hand-got coal in the old board and store method of doing it, and they were taking the full 26 foot of coal. They'd also got brooch coal here, which was about 2 foot 6. I believe there's some heathen, but I never saw that. I worked in heathen coal in Cannock, and also what they call flying reed coal, which is about 2 foot thick, very low ash content, and they called it royal coal because they used to supply the Earl of Dudley's households. I think, and I was told it also went to the royal households as well, because it was such good quality coal. Well, this is the information which is provided about the pit, and it's reasonably accurate, saying that the mining started in 1902 and continued to 68. It employed over 3,000 people at the height of its production, which was about 1912, and they produced 12,000 tonnes a week, but this was all done by hand. It says here it's 30 feet thick, the main coal seam, but it's 26 actually, and the rest of it just tells you about the concrete blocks which are just over there, and they were the legs of this headgear here. Right, so these concrete blocks behind me, these were the supports to the legs on the headgear at the top of number 1 shaft, which was 14 foot diameter, 2,000 feet deep. And when you went in that one, that's the one you went in to travel during the shift if you've got to go down to drop some stuff off for somebody, or if there was an emergency or somebody got to come out. You came up this one because the other one was busy winding the coal. When you went in there through the air doors, because the whole top was sealed, it was like going into a tropical place because it was so warm, humid, and when you actually went down the shaft you couldn't see much because it was the air was full of water vapour. You could smell the horses because the horses underground, the stable was about 150 yards up that way, and as I say, the air was very, very warm, and the oxygen and everything else had been taken away from it, so it was quite, as I say, quite humid. And that's the upcast shaft. So again, they're all filled in. Now these are the sort of tubs which were used originally when they used to take them right into the coal face and fill them up, and the colliers put their own tags on them and they'd know whose coal it was. In the later years, when I was here in the late 50s, early 60s, it was all conveyor belts. There were 7 conveyor belts right from the very back end near to Wolverhampton right to the pit bottom. These tubs were used in this shaft for taking supplies down. Not always tubs, sometimes they were just flat things to get supplies down the pit, and that was going on during the shift when the other one was winding coal. This one tended to wind a lot slower than the other one. It used to bounce a little bit, but it was a slower one. And as I say, the winding house was there, and then just behind the winding house was the carpenter's shop. He was just down there. These sculptures here were, I suppose it's been 10 years or so. There was a big union when they opened them. I know I turned up, and one or two of the people from when I was here turned up, and the expressing started a bit on it, I think, took some photographs. These aren't Baggeridge baths, but it was a standard procedure. You know, they were all the same. You had one locker one side. Looks like it's the clean side. No, he's got dirty boots on, dirty side. No, it's clean. So you'd go from the dirty side, have your shower, come back through, put your clean clothes on. There you go. Somebody would come and wash your back for you.
Yeah.
You see, and that is the top of that shaft there. And that's where it was all. When they were drawing coal, this was all pretty active, you know. And so that's the bottom. That's the bottom of that shaft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the way into this place was through First Street, which comes off Gospel End Road, and that was the way into the brickyard and to the pit. This current entrance to the country park didn't exist. That's been put in since this country park opened. And if you look at that junction up there, it's a pretty dangerous junction, but it was never any issues as far as I know. Yeah, opposite that junction was the manager's house. When that ceased to be the manager's house, I don't know, because the manager that was here when the pit shut, he was actually living in Hyde Park Crescent in Sedgley in a coal board owned property. Yeah, well, the pit mound's just over there. Now, up until the 1950s, it had got an aerial ropeway taking the spoil up there. But when I was here in the 60s, that had been done away with, and they just got one of these big dump trucks which runs up the concrete road, which is still there, and that used to go onto the top of the mound. When the pit finished, a lot of the stuff that was on there, when they were landscaping this, was used as infill for the shafts. And then as a means of making this all grow, because it was all pretty awful land, and the other side of the mound was a big lagoon full of black sludge, basically. That was all dug out. I was told it went to Stourport Power Station for burning, but I don't know. But then they brought in hundreds and hundreds of tons of cake, as they called it, from the filter beds over a period of months and months to put on the mound and all the way around it. And I've been told by a woman who lives in First Street, she's still there now, and her husband used to work on the coal tankers. She had some wonderful tomato plants that had come in this cake from the filter beds. So all the green stuff you can see up on the mound is growing in poo. When the pit finished, because the clay was either dug out of their own clay pits, which was near the brickyard, which is where they're building the houses now, or it came from the clay holes down near to the crooked house. But that was coming in on by road. So when the pit finished, they ripped the tracks up, and then they could then bring their these big earth moving things in to bring the clay up there, and that's why it's called the clay road now. But in actual fact, that's the railway. And so that of course it saved them money, because you hadn't got to have road legal vehicles, and it was shorter and you could carry more stuff. So that's what where the railway was. And that railway was originally it was running stuff down to Ashwood, where the marina is now, for coal to go onto barges or narrowboats to be distributed that way. Also it joined the main line, and then it went off to all the wharves around the country. A lot of it used to go to Stourport and Ironbridge power stations as well. It's too good for that really, but that's where it used to go. See, and the same principle applied in the pit bottom with this Crawley chain. That's a mine car, bigger than that, you see. They used to hold about half a tonne, where the mine car was 2.5 tonne of coal, and about 4 tonne of rock. And that just hooks them up, takes them in, and then a switchback system again brings them back round under the hopper for filling. That was then rammed onto the cage.
Yeah.
So when they're ramming them, the full ones off at the top, and to empty them, and then the empty ones go on. Down the bottom, the empty ones are being rammed off, full ones going on. Yeah. So when it finished, I think there were 550 men here, as opposed to its heyday, when there were 3,000. That's me on my last day at Hilton Main, with a man called George Plonka. His dad was Polish, and that's me again, same Hilton Main pit. Plus the other narrower seams all the way down to there, and there's millions and millions of tons of coal. It's just politics, and things have moved on. It's not wanted, but it still exists. You never know. Of the film, it's the British Film Archive, Film Industry Archive. It's easily accessible online. Just Google Baggeridge Colliery, and it'll come up BFI archive, and you can see it's mostly about the ponies, but there's lots of other stuff on there as well. It's worth a look.